There was nothing indicating that he should not own guns.
So then standing here on the other side of this podium, he possessed these guns legally. We know what he did with them. What could have been done? What should have been done?
Well, we have to stop people that have bad intentions. Guns, the story is always about guns. The people are bad. This guy's a bad guy. If I could take my gun off right now and I lay it on this counter, nothing will happen. It'll sit there. But as soon as a wicked person grabs a hold of that handgun and starts shooting people with it, there's the problem. The problem is the individual. Now, guns are a tool that people use to do horrible things, but it's the individuals that wield these things. So we are working hard to try to stop that. But in this situation, in this case, there was nothing illegal about him owning the firearm.
Finally, someone says what we have been saying in the gun community for decades now. I started a thing called Still Waiting on my Instagram page. It was a hashtag called Still Waiting. And what it was supposed to represent was this idea that we need to hold the people responsible for their actions. And the way we don't do that is by treating firearms like they are sentient beings. See, the gun has become a scapegoat for a lot of stupid decisions in our country, especially decisions made by our politicians. See, our politicians will go out and pass these policies and pass these laws that enable criminal activity, that enable people to be destructive, that enable people to murder. And then when they actually do these things, instead of looking at the individual who actually engaged in the action, we blame the gun. Someone explain to me how that makes any sense. We don't do that with any tool. We don't do it with hammers. We don't do it with forks. We don't do it with knives. We don't do it with any tool except for firearms. And ironically enough, it just so happens that it is the one tool that enables the American people to be free. So who's pushing this idea that the firearm is this sentient being that we must regulate because there's a person going out and making people kill? If you notice, it's always the politicians. It's always the anti-gun lobby. It's always people who are anti-gun. So like when people say it's not the tool, it's the person using the tool, and you have people who are like, yeah, but the tool lets the person do the thing. Nah. That's bullshit. Because in the same breath, you don't give that same ability to the tool in the hands of somebody trying to do good. When somebody saves somebody's life with a firearm, you don't say, look at the good job that gun did there. That gun allowed that person to save lives. But when somebody goes out and murders somebody with a gun, you're like, oh, well, that gun allowed that person to go out there and murder people. If somebody used a gun in a mass shooting, that gun allowed him, that particular gun, that assault weapon, allowed him to go out there and kill all those people. But when somebody uses the same type of gun to save a bunch of people's lives, you don't attribute the same ability to the gun. You don't treat it like a human. You treat it like a gun. You say, oh, that person saved all of those lives. And you just conveniently forget to mention the firearm. This has nothing to do with them actually believing that the gun is a sentient being. They know the gun isn't a real person. Well, some people, loopies out there, do genuinely treat guns like they're humans. But what this is about is it's a war against the firearm, but it really isn't. It's a war against our ability to be free. And if by any stretch of the imagination, you don't understand how a firearm allows us to continue to be free, you need to open your eyes. You need to read a history book. You need to start looking at the world around you. Notice that it's always the people in power trying to tell you you don't need a firearm. The same type of people who then, when it comes time to implement certain measures, lockdowns, or make you do anything you don't want to do, they're also pushing that too. But they also know that people can only be pushed so far before they say that's enough. But you can only say that's enough if you have something to back it up with. And the people can only back up their that's enough statement with their Second Amendment rights. The government understands that. These politicians understand that. Why the vast majority of people don't understand that is beyond me. And the thing is as long as we continue to focus on the firearm as being the problem, more people are going to continue to die. It's just going to make the problem worse. Because when you focus on the firearm and you blame the firearm for the actions of people, you remove the accountability from those people. And when you remove those accountabilities, those people continue to engage in those same actions, whether they use a gun, whether they use a knife, or whatever tool they decide to engage in those actions. So what we don't do is then focus on how do we stop these people by engaging in those actions, from engaging in those actions. No, instead we say, okay, how can we ban all of the guns? How can we take the guns away from people? And then what happens? You end up in a situation where The criminals are still going to criminal, and the people who are just trying to live their lives are going to end up continuously becoming victims. But for some reason, people don't want to accept this common sense. And I get it. Some of it is just fear. They're just scared of firearms. And that's understandable. There are a lot of things that people are scared of. Doesn't make it any less irrational. So here we are in a country filled with over 300 million guns, and you think you're going to ban your way to safety? You think banning firearms is going to somehow stop criminals from engaging in criminality? There's nothing, and I mean nothing, more creative than a criminal mind wanting to kill people. They're going to find a way to do it. If they don't use guns, they'll use bombs. If they use bombs, they'll use knives. It doesn't stop from there. For as long as this world has existed, we have had people who have wanted to take innocent lives. It's always been that way. You're not going to make them go away. And you're not going to be able to neuter a society so much that it's going to make the criminals incapable of doing the very thing that they want to do, which is take innocent lives. So what do? You do what we do on a national and global scale. Our military doesn't, our world doesn't function on the idea of get rid of all the guns and all the weapons, and then any country or any dictator that wants to become tyrannical on a global level will stop doing it because he can't, because he doesn't have the guns. No, you invest in your defenses. You invest in your ability to protect the country. The same way when you're dealing with criminals on a local level, you invest in your ability to protect yourself against those criminals, because those criminals are going to continue to do what they do. So when they do it, and they do it to you, you are in a position to stop them, because there's nothing you can do if you give up your gun, but then they still have a gun because they didn't follow the stupid law that you followed that took away your gun. Now you're standing there like, you're not supposed to have that. Criminals like, so what? I do. So we've got to start changing this conversation when it comes to this idea that it's the gun's fault. We need to get rid of the guns. The guns. I get it. Some people just don't like guns because in their minds it represents something that they're scared of, or something that they hate, or represents violence. So be it. You don't use that same mentality when it comes to things like knives, and knives kill a bunch of people. But no, as a matter of fact, you'll actually use that same knife to go and cut your stupid bagel in the morning for your breakfast and not even think about it, because you don't have any intent on using that knife in a bad manner, which is why I never understood how people could look at a firearm and say, well, I don't want a firearm because I think I'm gonna do something crazy and dangerous with it, but then not have that same mentality with a knife. So this idea that a firearm has this like special human ability to cause people to kill or to walk up and do it itself is childish. It's a childish conversation, and I'm glad that this particular sheriff actually stood up in front of the press and told them that. This is somebody who's at the front lines of this shit. But I guarantee you, you're not going to see this spread throughout the media. It's not a narrative that they want to push, because if they push that narrative, that means that they have to start addressing the real issues. And they don't want to address the real issues because they either don't know how to deal with it, or they won't have the leverage to utilize these types of situations to ban the thing that they feel gives us too much power. And that is our 2A rights and our ability to own firearms. Guns aren't political. That's why I need your help getting this message to spread on YouTube by clicking the thumbs up button, leaving a comment to let me know what you think of the video, then subscribing to the channel. But most importantly, click that bell symbol. For products featured in this video, click the links in the description.